Hello, I'm Stephen Davy, violin maker and owner of this violin shop here in Laguna Beach. And I'm here today with my friend Hekar and Amy, and we're talking about violins. And I'm holding a violin that Hekar has been playing for some time now, that I'm very pleased to have him do that, to break this violin in and make the improvements on the sound and develop the sound, and enjoy making violins. You can see in front of me here two more that I'm working on. One that is almost ready for varnishing. We've started the preliminary process of the finishing, and this is a copy of another Guarneri, as this one is. This is the design is of 1731 Fritz Kreisler's violin, and it's a one-piece back and two-piece, of course, on the front, or we call it the top plate. And I'm excited about this violin to finish it and have Hekar play it and see what I've done here. Hopefully, I do believe that this is going to be one of my best efforts. And nice old pieces of wood, probably well over 100 years old, this piece. And special wood on the face, on the top, from my teacher, Mr. Carl Roy, who is no longer with us, but he was just wonderfully generous to me, and I spent a lot of time with him. And he's just an inspiration to all violin makers who worked under him. So we're here looking at violins, and this is one that's in the very beginning stages. Whoops. And as you can see, the ribs have been formed on the what we call the mold or the form. And this is also will be another Guarneri model with a wonderful piece of maple that's quite old now, and it'll probably be 3 or 4 months before it really takes shape. And also excited to see how this will be. Every violin that I make, I can always make improvements from what I did on the previous. But so far, I believe that this one will be my best effort so far for a lot of reasons. And the violin varnishing process is something that's been mysterious for many, many years. And now, because of science, we're getting much closer to what the great Italians were doing. And these are and these violins that I've made here are following that tradition that I learned from my teacher Albert Mollier in Washington, D.C. when I was much younger. I started violin building in 1973, and Albert was the curator at the Library of Congress for the great Stradivari and Guarneri collection, and he was very generous with me and showed me a lot, not only for violin making but restoration. And I was very fortunate to get to know him, being really one of the world's greatest violin makers in the last, I would say, in the last 100 years. He made a lot of beautiful violins and took care of the great violins at the Library of Congress and for the National Symphony. And so I try to stay inspired by the teachers that I've had, and they keep me going. And you know, it's a challenging business to be in today.
Can you tell us more about what gave you the inspiration to follow the Kreisler's pattern?
Why I inspired to do that? Well, that violin by Fritz Kreisler, or that Fritz Kreisler played on for so many years, was at the Library of Congress where Albert took care of the collection there. And I just was taken by that violin. I've always loved Fritz Kreisler's work. And so I decided to try to recreate that model. It's a little different than some Guarneris. It's an earlier Guarneri model. And the F-holes are a little bit different, not so stylistic as the later Del Gesù Guarneri that we always think of. But that's the one that I like the most, and I continue to create violins in that design.
You must have had a lot of great access to great instruments at the Library of Congress.
Yes, yeah. At the Library of Congress, I was able to see the great Betz Strad, the Castelbarco, the Cassavetti. All these are really important violins that Stradivari created. And when I was younger, of course, it was just such a wonderful thing to be around such, fantastic works of art, not only for their appearance, but obviously the sound was, something that's mystified violin makers for hundreds of years. But I think the modern violin makers, with all the science and all the history that we now know, coming closer and closer to creating violins that are, I would say, almost on equal par to the great Italians. So we continue our craft every day, and it's a joy to have an opportunity to create these things.
How long has it been since you made your first violin?
Oh, I made my first violin in 1974. Wow. And I still have that violin, and I never tried to sell it. It was just something I hung on to just for nostalgia, and it was pretty good, not too bad. It got me in the door of Albert Moyer's workshop, and he thought that for my first effort that was pretty good, and that I should continue to study and create violins. And so with his inspiration and other great men that I was able to meet and work with, I created a business out of it, not only for violin building, but restoration, bow rehairing, and bow work every day. It's a full-service shop where we also have not just violins, but violas, cellos, and some basses, and, as you've seen, guitars. So I was always interested in and played professionally on guitar, but fell in love with the great Django Reinhardt's music. And I continue to play, from time to time, every day, on one of those great guitars by the French, the Macaferi and the Selmer designs. There's definitely a growing interest, and has been for the last 15 years or so, in the music of Django, and there's many young people who have found the style of guitar playing by the great gypsies, including Django and many others, to be really a challenge to pursue. And more we see young people who can play this style, and it keeps it alive. And generally all music that has impressed people over the years usually comes back, and Django's music has definitely made a comeback, and always from the time I was 15 or so. It was Stefan Grappelli, the great violinist, and Django Reinhardt, the great two-fingered gypsy jazz guitarist, who composed many interesting pieces that are still played today. So I'm a fortunate person to be doing this almost 50 years now. And we continue to do our craft every day and enjoy the music. And the art of violin making is very, very challenging and very humbling, I should say.
Can you tell us how long have you been here in Laguna Beach?
I came to Laguna Beach in 1982 for the first time. I actually was 81 the first time, and then went back to the Washington D.C. area where I had where I worked in the business, and decided to move to Laguna Beach. I came to visit a friend of mine who I was in the military with, and he lived here and was, I think, born here and had lived with his family in Laguna Beach his whole life. And of course, during the Vietnam era, we were all drafted, and I subsequently met him in the military. After my time in Vietnam, I met him at Andrews Air Force Base, where we were in the security force with President Nixon. And so after we both got out, he said I should come to Laguna Beach and visit. So I did, and I kind of never went back. So I'm fortunate to have had a wonderful career so far here in town. I've had my store now since about '92. Enjoy coming here every day, continue to do my work, and visiting with good friends like Hekar and Amy. Made lots of great friends here, lots of musician friends. Had a successful business for some time now. So I guess you could say that's my story.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hekar.
All right.